Hey everybody, as many of you might have already seen from last night's racing that I got in a couple racing incidents with a couple other drivers. A little bit of bent steel, bent axles, maybe hurt prides, who knows. Anyways, everybody's good. They'll race again in the next 2 weeks when we race again on, I think it is, it'll be like May 9th or 10th. Anyways, it's right around that time. Be 2 weeks from now. So anyways, I got a little bit of work to do on my go-kart. I did end up bending the rear axle, so we're going to replace the rear axle today, which is not that big of a deal. We'll clean the kart. We'll put the snipers on the front end of the go-kart, make sure all that's all lined up. And over the next couple days, we'll take it over to Curtis's at Innovative Karting and put it in the frame machine, make sure everything's straight from the accident. Anyways, it shouldn't take us that long. Hopefully I'll probably just rob another bumper off one of my other go-karts, and we'll go from there. That side of the go-kart does look a little bit higher than the other side, so we'll have to take that into consideration. But we'll get this bad boy all up and running, and we'll be racing. I think it's the second weekend in, what do you call it, May. So first things first, after the crash, and after you decide that, yep, you do have to turn around, you can see that that wheel is floppy. So you got to take off these 3 lug nuts that hold the wheel on. You're going to, right here, you've got 3 set screws that you're going to take off. You're going to unloosen the 2 screws that hold on your brake rotor. You're going to take your chain off. So you got 6 bolts right here that take your chain off, that hold your chain on. You're going to take that off. You got another set of set screws right on the inside of this. You're going to take that out. I'll probably leave these bottles here. And then you're going to take the other wheel off. You got a set of hubs on each side. You're going to take those hubs off. You're going to take this hub off. You're also going to take this keeper off. You also got another keeper that sits right here that holds the brake rotor. And then you've got another keeper that holds the sprocket in place. So you got a couple things that you do have to detach. It does not take that long. It usually takes me about 10 or 15 minutes to do this job. So anyways, I'll set up the camera in such a position, probably from this angle, and I'll try to do it so that you can see how I'm doing it. Now to take off the wheels, you need a 10mm socket, impact. There's another tool that you can use that kind of looks like this. This has got a 10mm on this side. It's got a 10mm on that side. So you can also use this to take off the lugs if you want to. I prefer to use a DeWalt. I think DeWalt's the best. I'm not getting any kind of endorsement for saying that. I just firmly believe DeWalt is the best until another product comes out that's orange. And then I don't care what the product is. I will probably buy it because it's orange. But for right now, DeWalt happens to be the best I've seen. You've got enough torque. The battery life is really good, so I really like the DeWalt stuff. On each side are 3. I have 3 lugs, and I also have 3 washers. I always use washers. I don't know if everybody else does, but I use the lug and then I use the washer. Just take off the hubs. Need nothing more than 1 piece. Eight and 11/16. Now, whenever I take something apart, I'll always mark where it's at. From the edge of this orange flange right here to the edge of my hub is 8 and 11/16. So it kind of gives me approximately where I'm at. these keepers out. These keepers are nothing more than, they just sit in there, and you can see it's just a piece. So what I'll normally do is just come in on one side and just kind of pry them up. And I am doing this with one hand. I'm by myself today. They just come out just like that. I always have a magnetic case right here that I'll put here. When I don't put it in the back right here, I'll usually set it right here on these two rails. That way I've always got a place where all my nuts and bolts go. Some people like to throw their parts in the seat. I do too, just not today. Now I'll go to the other side. Got a couple lugs that are seem like they're rounding out a little bit. You can see where a couple of the lugs right here just starting to round, so I might replace those. Again, 3 washers. Just like the other side. Now this is kind of cool. It's got a Allen head right here, and what happens is when you back this out, it hits this Allen head and it'll spread this apart a little bit, which makes it easier to pull out. I don't know if that's really what it's for, or if it's to keep this Allen from backing out all the way, but if it gets this loose and you're racing, this hub is coming off. So it kind of tells me that this Allen right here serves 2 purposes. One, so that the bolt doesn't come all the way out that holds the hub to the axle. The other one is so that I could back it into there and it'll spread that apart. So I'm going to have to ask Curtis about that, but it could be one of those 2 things. Like the other side, we just got to come down here and pry this out. Okay, that's done. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these grub screws. There's 1, 2, 3 grub screws. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take them all the way out. So this is not a hard job. Like I said, it does not take long to do this. The other side. Holding it on a tripod as best I can so that I can work. And again, there'll be 3 grub screws on this side too. Good catch. So, I apologize guys if this is boring. Just trying to give you guys a different idea of what it takes to actually go racing. And this is just in the LO206 division. LO206 actually is pretty simple to race. I'm going to go ahead and take these out of here just to get them out of my way. See, I'm using the seat to hold stuff. Okay, there, that way that's out of my way. And let's see what's next. We will pull the sprocket down. Now again, the sprocket is pretty much a lot of things on the go-kart are usually the same sizes. You don't need a lot of tools to go go-kart racing. You can get by with a minor, minimal tool setup for probably $100. Now if you want to go fancy, yeah, it's going to cost you more. Like, you don't have to go with a dual impact. You can go with a Ryobi, you can go with something cheaper. Heck, you don't even have to have that. You can go with a speed wrench from Craftsman. It it all gets down to what your flavor is. I like tools, so I always try to buy the best tools, and that's just the way I am. Sprocket. A lot of oil on sprocket. Put sprocket someplace where it doesn't get the oil and crap all over your hands. So, okay, we got that done. Okay, now we gotta unloosen this. This will actually come out once we get to it. But a couple other things we gotta disconnect what holds this on. Whoop, wrong size. It can't be. Somebody's got gorilla hands. Can't imagine who that is. If Curtis is watching this video, he knows who's got the gorilla hands. JD, when he helped me do the front end on my kart, found out about gorilla hands too. In my past, I used to race desert racing, and I used a lot of Loctite and I used a lot of force. I basically didn't use a torque wrench. I went with PFT, and you figure out what PFT means. This is a family channel. Okay, we're just going to do a recap. We've taken the tires off of this side, and I took the tires off that side. We took the hubs off along with the keeper. We took out the grub screws. We've loosened up our brake rotor. We took the 6 10mm nuts that held on the sprocket. What do you call it? Held out the sprocket, pulled the sprocket off. This is all loose. We unloosened the 2 bolts that hold this cluster on. We took the grub screws out of here, and then we took that off. Now, normally I would push the axle out from left to right, looking forward on the go-kart. Because it is bent right here, I'm going to take it from this side and push it this way. I personally have never had to do it that way. I don't know if it's harder or easier. I can't see why it would be harder. But anyways, I've got to go from the right side of my kart, pushing it to the left side. So we'll get the camera all lined up and I'll show you how I do it. Now, I do have a special tool for doing this, and this is the tool. And what the tool does, it's actually got an indent right here from this edge to this edge, so that it actually sits on the inside of the axle, so it's not to damage the axle. So there again, this is a specialty tool. Not everybody has these. Not everybody will buy these. I prefer to be somebody that can basically take care of my own stuff. I still have to borrow tools here and there. Like, I do not have a frame straightener, like a rack as I call it. I'm not really sure what Curtis calls it, but I don't have one of those. But if I keep crashing like I have lately, I can see one in my future. So anyways, we're going to get this camera reset up, and then we'll push the axle out. There are a couple things you have to do when you go to do that. On this, I'm going to push a screwdriver in here to spread this apart so that it slides easier. Once I start moving over, then this one should slide out pretty easy. So. There might be some people watching this right now that are going to cringe at the way I do it. Please leave a comment in my what do you call it, in the comments below, because if I'm doing something wrong and you guys got a better way, please open your mouth. I might not be able to do it that way. I don't know. Huh. Like I said before, I've never had to go this way. That's sliding pretty easy. This is sliding. I'll keep going. Well, with a little bit of persuasion, it is coming out. Slow process. That piece off, put the chain on the other side. So, almost there. Almost got one side out of the barrel. Okay, one side's out of the bearing. I'll show you what it looks like. See, it's already come out of the bearing right here. See, this piece right here comes out. See, this is actually made so that it will actually go through that bearing, and then it will actually line up and push on the bearing, or on the axle itself. So, anyways, we're getting there little by little. I'm going to shut this off and pull it the rest of the way out. I think you guys got the idea of how it takes. So just take your time. I should be using a rubber mallet. I just didn't have one where I was at. Okay, as you can see, I've now got the axle out of there and stuff. So now's the time to do just a little bit of maintenance. I use Tri-Flow Superior Lubricant, and I'll use that on these bearings. And just, you know, they got a little bit dirty from that race. And yeah, I might be replacing those bearings soon. Don't know if I'm going to do it right now. Doubt it. Anyways, now's a good time to just wipe it down, make sure everything's clean, look for loose bolts, anything that can turn around and get you hurt when you're getting ready for your next race. How often should you clean your go-kart? Well, I have this theory, and it goes like this. Every time you go off the track, it's about an hour's worth of cleaning. Every 10 feet further you go off the track adds another hour. If you go 40 or 50 feet off the track, you might as well call it a day, because you've got so much cleaning and you're not even in your game that day. So, anyways, that's kind of where I was at. So, anyways, we'll do a bunch of cleaning on this, make sure it's all up, ready to go, and then we'll slide the other new axle in. I'll kind of, if this axle can be straightened, I will have it straightened. I won't use it for a primary axle, but I'll keep it in my entourage of parts. And I call it a Save a Race collection of parts. When you go to tracks that aren't at your local track and you're traveling by yourself or with a team, sometimes, even if it's a bent axle that's been straightened out, that might be all it takes to save the race and to save the weekend, so that you are able to continue to race the rest of that weekend. So I call it a kind of a save a race kit. You know, I've got all kinds of parts that I keep, just like Curtis does and some of the other teams do. They just keep some of these parts around because you never know. It's not perfect to race on for like the Super Nationals, but for local racing or club racing, it might just save your evening. Okay, I now have the axle out of the go-kart. I have the new axle that I've put in here just to make sure it's straight and spins right. And it seems to be looking pretty good. So, I've been cleaning up parts for the last probably 10-15 minutes, and then we'll start assembling this. Before I turn around and go on to assembling everything, I wanted to show you something that I normally do. I have taken and I have completely cleaned this part. This is the part that holds the chain guard that also holds the two sprockets. But I also wanted to show you something else. When you put this together, it's a two-piece sprocket. So when you look at the sprockets, a lot of people try to figure out which side is which and stuff like that. Sometimes you can see the imprint from what was there, and if you look on the other side, right here, it'll have two marks. Okay? It'll also sometimes say number 35, which is the size chain. That's also the size sprocket. On this side, it'll tell you how many teeth. Like this one has 56 teeth. So normally when I turn around and put it on, I will drop it down like this, and then I'm drop it down like this. Now I'm just showing this as a demonstration. Okay? With the second part, I have put a little nick right here, and then 180 degrees, I put another little nick. Because when you line it up, sometimes these parts right here, you can see how they move up and down a little bit. It'll cause your chain to be wavy. So you want them to be as even as possible. And you can see there is a little bit of movement in this sprocket on this device right here. And I believe this is a device that's made by a company called Triple T. Fantastic chain guard. If you don't have one, I recommend having it for any four-stroke go-kart type of racing. So, anyways, when I turn around and do this, since I have a split here and I have a split here, what I have done is I'll mark it this side of my chain guard, and I put another one here. That way, when I slide it down on the chain guard, I know where the split is, so that when I'm turning around and doing it, my chain is actually going around like this. I'll tighten one side, and then I'll tighten the other side. Then I'll go through and do the other four. This is just a little trick that I have found that lets me know exactly where the sprocket is sitting on this device right here. I'm not sure what to call this, a chain guard, I guess. It's the greatest thing in the world. When I first started racing World Formula, the chains used to always come off, and these came out. Might have been before I started or during the time I had first started my first year, but after getting this was a godsend. It just, all the problems with the chain coming off the sprocket completely went away. If you hit curbs, the chain is completely protected and stuff like that. Highly recommend getting one. I don't know what they cost, but you can call Curtis Ruth at Innovative Karting, and he has these readily available and in stock. Again, I believe it's made by Triple T. Triple T also makes the mounts that mount to the Briggs & Stratton motor that mount to the go-kart that make it easier to adjust the chain tension from moving the motor forward and back. The company Triple T makes awesome parts. So again, highly recommend, but this is just kind of a little trick that I do. I'm going to go back to reassembling it and getting everything up and ready. Okay, so now we're ready to install the axle. Now the axle can go in two different ways. One way is correct and one way is wrong. You've got this where your keeper goes right here, and that holds the hub on this side. Then you've got another one right here that holds the, the brake rotor. Then you've got another one right here. This holds your sprocket. And then for a tag, this will be your sprocket on the outside. And if you turn it, this is where your other hub goes. So if you do it the opposite way, you're going to be pulling your axle back out. So make sure you do it correctly. Okay? So anyways, you start by sliding it through your bearings. Just be very careful and just take your time. You only go so far. Now you'll grab your bearing cluster. And what I did is I just kind of put it together. I put the sprocket in there. I put everything on there. There's my little notes that tell me, where the split is in the sprocket. You can see one right there, and you can see one right there. That's just something that I do. And if you look down there, you can actually tell that is split apart on the inside. And then you got that. That's just something that I do. Kind of a little, little check and balance system I have. So anyways, you'll take this. Your nuts always go, because if you turn it around the other way, you can't get the sprocket off, you can't get the keeper off. So it goes toward the center of the go-kart. So you'll take that, you'll slide that on there, and just take your time. And then everything should slide real easy, because it's all been cleaned. Now when I clean my go-kart parts, I do it in several different ways. The one way I do it is I'll use Simply Green on certain things. and then I'll use Dawn. I find that if Dawn was good enough to get the oil off all those birds and all those ducks from that oil spill up there in Alaska, it's good enough to get the grease and grime from PKRA off of my go-kart. So, plus it makes my hands nice and soft. So, anyways, push that in there just a little bit. Then you get down to your brake rotor. Now comes the fun part. The brake rotor is a pain in the butt to get back on there sometimes. Not always, but you just got to take your time. I'm going to go ahead and shut this off for a second. I want to clean one more thing. Okay, I'm back. What I did is I actually went in and I cleaned up any kind of boogers or any kind of stuff that might have gotten in here. And I'll just use a green Scotch-Brite. You can see where this is kind of marked up right here on this side. And could be from rust, could be from me not cleaning it enough. Anyways, I always try to make sure I do a good job of cleaning this before I put it back together. And then just look for any kind of cracks. I have cracked a couple different rotors in the past. So anyways, we stick this, get it in between the two brake pads. You got your brake pad here and your brake pad there. I think I might be contacting Curtis and get me a set of new brake pads. Okay, as you see, it goes on there pretty easy. Okay. Now I got to put a keeper right here. This keeper goes for this. So that's the first one I put in. This is what this looks like. It's got two holes on the bottom. It'll go into this hole and into this hole right there. Turn that up a little bit. Just slide that right in there just like that. And then turn around and just slide the rotor. And it should slide right in there. It's sliding right into that little area right there. Just like so. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and get this axle put in place. You kind of saw how I did that, and then I'll turn back on the video and we'll go on to a little bit more. Okay. Now before I go too far, if you look underneath here, I got two more holes right here. I can turn it sideways a little bit. That is for this right here. So it's got to go into the slot that's on this, which is, let's see if I can find it and turn it. There. Now I got the slot kind of lined up. So I'll put this piece in before I go too far, and that way, since there's no bearing here, see sometimes there'll be a bearing hooked to this, just like this one right here. You can have an inboard bearing right here. So what I do is I'll actually put the keeper in and then I'll slide it through as I'm hitting it with the mallet. Okay, well I now have the axle installed in the go-kart. It's approximately 7 5/8 from the side of the bearing carrier all the way to the edge of the axle. Make sure it's even on both sides. Next you put in your grub screws. Now when you put in your grub screws, this axle has been previously used. This is a straight axle. It's in perfect condition, but there'll be 3 spots on the grub screws. What you want to do is you want to stick one of your grub screws in, and then you pull it down so that you can see the top one, and then you rotate the axle to find out the last place that there was a grub screw. Normally I go back to the same spots. I'm not sure if that's proper. This is just what I've been doing. If somebody that's been doing this longer than I have will comment in the comments below, I would sure appreciate it. This is just what I have done for the last 4 or 5 years that I've been involved in go-karting. Nobody's told me any different. I have watched Curtis do it several times, and usually that's what I think he's doing. Either that or he's going in between. Personally, I go back to the same spots. That way I pretty much know on both sides it will be in the same spot. So anyways, we'll go ahead and do that, and we're just about done with this particular project. Okay, I've lined up all the grub screws. The one thing that I do recommend checking whenever you race is your grub screws. I recommend that before you go out on the track for your race day for that morning, or while you're doing your maintenance the night before a race or a practice, I recommend checking these. I went to a race in California at LAKC, and I had my grub screws come loose. The whole axle shifted, and that was during a practice day. And basically I didn't race the next day because I couldn't find the parts because I was out of town and I was racing at not a local event. I'm sure that if I would have been racing at my home track, I could have probably made it work. But since then, I've learned my lesson that I always check the grub screws. Now these are funny. You don't have to go super tight. There's 3 of them. I always tighten them, and then I'll go about an eighth of a turn. So that's about right there. I'll untighten it, and I'll come back to where it's tight, and then I'll go just a little bit more. There again, if somebody knows something different that I don't know, please leave a comment below. I'd really appreciate it. Anyways, that's just... Okay, we've now tightened all the grub screws. You got one here, you got one here, you got one here. Next thing I do is I'll turn around and I'll do the chain guard. I'll line up the chain. Now the chain is kind of a tricky situation to do. First, you need a 15 millimeter wrench. What you're going to do is you're going to untighten the chain tension, or there's two 15 millimeter nuts that adjust the chain, and there's a motor plate. So what happens is, see how this can slide back and forth. Okay. After you do that, I got to take off these two nuts. Put those there. Now, they make a handy little gadget, and it's got a laser on it. Okay. The laser will help you line up the chain. If you look, you can see the red light. See the red light on the black? Okay, that's how you're going to do it. So, what you do, you actually got to pull the chain off the clutch. The clutch for the go-kart is this piece right here. So it spins around, and it's got a sprocket on it. What you're going to do is you're going to move your chain out of the way, slide the chain over there. You're going to take this piece right here, move these out of the way so you don't make a mess. Okay, so you move your chain over here to get it out of the way, and you put your chain guard over here. Now this, you only need one sprocket to be on here right now, and then you kind of get this where you think it's going to go. Okay, what you're going to do, you're going to push your sprocket on there. You're going to take your chain tensioning device, which I don't remember where I just put mine. Okay, and you're going to stick the device basically on here, and you're going to line up the red dot with the center of the sprocket. So basically, looking at this back chain right here, see how I got that? Put that right in the center right there. You want to line that up so it's right in the center of the sprocket. Okay, now the sprocket's in the back, and that's the drive wheel up on the clutch. So you're going to line it up. It's kind of hard for me to explain, but it's going to sit like this, and that's going to turn around, and I'm going to try to get it as close to lining it up so that it hits right here on this particular wheel stuff. I wish I had 2 hands so I could show you guys better how to do this, but you want to line up this rear sprocket with this front drive sprocket and use this laser. These aren't expensive. Couldn't even tell you what I actually paid for it. Under $100. Well worth your time. All these little tools that I have for working on the go-kart, save you time and give you the ability to do this on your own without having to take it to the go-kart shop and stuff. If you're going to go and do races out of town, or you're going to do races, you know, in other cities, it's good to have certain tools so that you can take care of yourself and you can go racing. So anyways, I'm going to get this all lined up and I'll show you how I do it. Okay, I now have the chain on the sprocket up front on the drive wheel, and I now have the sprocket in the back. What I normally do is when I'm doing this, I'll put one nut here and one nut here, which is, there's my mark, so that's where the split is on the sprocket, right here, and the other one is right there. So I've got a split, just like I showed you in the one video. So I'll put a nut down here and a nut down here, and then what happens is the two sprockets meet right here, so I'll put that 180 degrees away from this, and then I'll tighten this down here, and I'll tighten that. And that way I don't get any kind of movement up and down with the sprocket. And then I go back and I'll put the other 4 nuts on and I'll tighten them down. So this is not a hard process, it's just you got to take a little bit of precautions to make sure that this is done right, because you want to, every little thing that you don't take care of that somebody else is taking care of on their go-kart, that puts them 1/10 of a second faster than you are. So kind of give you an idea, if you practice 1 day a week and the guy that's beating you is practicing 2 days a week, if you want to beat him, you better go out and practice 3 days a week. Otherwise, you are not going to beat the guy that practices 2 days a week if you're only practicing 1 day a week. Now it gets down to, you're practicing 4 days a week, he's practicing 4 days a week. Now it gets down to skill. And then it's going to get down to who wants it more than the other driver. So there's a lot of different ideas and different theories on how to win races, but whatever the guy is that is winning, either A, he's a very talented driver, or B, he's just got more laps in out at the track than you do. Give you a for instance, there's 2 gentlemen, they're cousins. One's name's Micah Hendricks, the other one's name is Toby Longenecker. Everybody knows Toby's my buddy, and I'm kind of fond of Micah also. They're both very, very good drivers. They both have a lot of character, and you know, they're both, when they win, it's because they're out there. They're out there trying. Micah, I don't believe practices as much as he used to, but from what I understand, Micah used to go out 2, 3, 4 days a week. I remember going when I first started 4 years ago, Toby was going out 2 or 3 days a week. It's no wonder that these 2 kids can turn around and run the lap times they do so consistent. If you want to run with the best, you have to do what the best is doing. So, okay, chains on. Sorry about the preaching, everybody. So now we go to the brake rotor. The brake rotor right here. Okay, the last thing you have to do is you got to line up this right here. There's an indent right here. You can kind of see it. Just vaguely see it. You want to put the center of this right in the center of that on the you want to put the rotor right in the center of that housing. And this will move a little bit. It'll center itself. And then you've got 2 Allen screws, one right here and one right here, Allen bolts. Turn around and tighten them down. And basically that's what it takes to replace your rear axle. Now I will not be putting these back in, and I will not be putting the hubs back in, because I'm going to take this go-kart over to Courtesy Shop and stick it in the frame straightener, so I'm going to have to take those off anyway. Sometimes they get in the way. So I'll probably take the front tires and wheels off the go-kart and get this thing all ready, and we'll put it up in the frame straightener, make sure she's all straight. I think she's off by probably a good inch. But anyways, remember to always tighten your grub screws. Remember to always tighten the 3 grub screws before and after every race. and stuff for the race weekend. I've got the chain all tightened and stuff like that. Make sure you check these two. You can also check, you've got several bolts right here. Check those, make sure they're tight. This is all just general maintenance you should be doing after every time you run your kart and stuff. So, and then wipe your kart down. Nobody likes looking at a dirty kart. Mine is filthy right now, and mine's cleaner than most. So, anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. And, well, I hope that helps show how you replace the rear axle on a go-kart. Now, mine's an Intrepid go-kart. Some go-karts might have the chain on the outside, which means it's a tag or a shifter. It's a little different, but it's still the same. You still got to take the hubs off first. You got to slide those off. You got to slide off the keepers that keep it locked on. Then you got to slide out your grub screws. You put a wedge inside. I always put a wedge inside my brake caliper, and I always use one inside here just to spread it apart a little bit and slide it out. And this took me, because of the video, probably a good hour, hour and a half to do it, when in reality, it probably only took me about 20 minutes. So I was doing setup and stuff. I didn't have a cameraman to help me out today. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys at the races. Well, yesterday we pulled the axle out of the go-kart, and today we've taken the go-kart, put it back up in the trailer, and we've headed over to Innovative Karting. Curtis said I could use his frame rack and we'll get that go-kart all up and running. So anyways, we're going to go inside and see what's going on at Innovative Karting, and then we'll take the go-kart out. Well, we have the go-kart up in the rack, and let's see how bad we are. What you do is turn around, you bring this to where it touches right here. Go to the other side. Oh yeah. We are off by just a little bit. Probably a good 1/4 of an inch. So I think we can straighten that out. We'll be back up and racing shortly.